In the opening scene, Tanisu is seen walking home from the convenience store with a bag of groceries with his brother Snow, in his dog form. He smiles, as he realizes how well his brother Snow is handling being a dog and blending in perfectly. Tanisu gets home in one piece and finds the entire place empty and dark. He tried calling for anybody, but nobody answered him. He gets a little startled and almost drops one of the fruits, but Snow helps him get the fruit back in the bag. Together the duo get to the living room and call out to anybody who could be home so they won't think there was a robber around. Suddenly, Aisuri creeps up to Tanisu and scares him with spider legs hanging down her back. Scared, Tanisu waits for his sister to materialize before talking to her. When she does, she asks him what he had for dinner. Tanisu tells her he bought some veggies, but then again, Aisuri wanted meat and nothing else. In the end, Tanisu ignores his disgruntled elder sister and checks in on the other two, Suishi and Ashisu, who are busy doing their thing. Once he's confirmed they're all okay, he gets to the kitchen to begin cooking dinner for the family. While he's at it, he recaps the story of his life and mentions every power his siblings came to possess after having their genes manipulated and mutated. While Tanisu is pretty normal, Aisuri has animal-like agility alongside the spidery limbs attached to her back. As for Snow, he could turn into a dog and revert his form to a human at will. Ashisu is the plant girl. Their parents modified her body to act like fertile soil for different plants and mushrooms to grow on. All she needs is sunlight and a little water. Last but not least, Suishi. Now Suishi is the quiet one, but for good reason. Having been granted the power to read minds, Suishi, who once had a mental breakdown, locked herself up in the house to avoid getting close to many humans at once, so she doesn't break down from hearing too many thoughts at a time. When he was much younger, Tanisu's parents would employ tutors to lecture him on subjects and the like. Back then, he would wait and watch them perform horrible experiments on his siblings with no ability to help them out at the time. Upon snapping back to reality, Tanisu finds a bug on the kitchen wall and freaks as he realizes what's happening next. Before he could say a word or do something about it, Aisuri jumped all over the place and trashed the kitchen, including all the groceries Tanisu had bought earlier. Ashisu walks over to the kitchen and throws all his food in the trash. Sad, Tanisu gets worried about what to do about his siblings. When it comes down to it, he suggests they go out for dinner. Aisuri gets excited and asks if they are having bugs for dinner. Tanisu tells her not to think that way and that they're just going to get normal food. Everyone refuses to go out with poor Tanisu, and he's left with no choice but to sulk all day. He gets back to his room, switches off the TV playing the news, and goes to nap for a bit. When he wakes up, his siblings change their minds and decide to go out with Tanisu to an outdoor restaurant under a canopy. On getting there, Tanisu teaches his siblings how to wash their cups and serve tea to themselves. With a wide grin on his face, Tanisu asks his people to order their food from the menu. Aisuri catches him smiling and asks him about it. Tanisu tells them he's only happy that they finally have some time to go out and act like normal people for once. Aisuri's still not impressed with his countenance, but she keeps quiet. Minutes later, the waiter brings their food and Snow immediately transforms into a dog and eats like a wild animal. The waitress picks Snow up and places him on the ground before giving him some of the dumplings to eat. Aisuri plays with her food while the others are pretty nonchalant about their food. Tanisu watches his siblings eat voraciously and trash the entire table without a care in the world. He also listens in on the people staring at them and making vicious comments about them. When he gets tired of all their talks, he loses and confronts his siblings about their behavior. Aisuri stops him from running his mouth way too much and asks him why he's obsessed with them acting like they're normal. Tanisu shyly tells them about his meeting with a cool dude back then and tells them he may be selfish and all, but he just wants to enjoy some quality time with his siblings, that's all. Upon hearing this, Snow and Ashiya comport themselves and eat like normal people for Tanisu's sake. Aisuri eats a little bit after much persuasion, and they all find out just how delicious the dish is. Tanisu remains calm and hopes things go right this time around. Thankfully, his siblings seem eager to learn, and Tanisu teaches them how to use the fork. After dining out for an hour or so, Tanisu and his siblings prepare themselves to get back home. Mere moments after they get out of the restaurant, Tanisu takes one last look at his siblings and recalls all the horrible things they've passed through. His siblings notice him crying and ask him what the matter is. Tanisu tells them not to worry too much about him and that he'll be fine. With that, he continues his journey back home with his siblings and ends the day on a happy note. A few years ago, when Tanisu was still much younger than he was now, his parents assigned a tutor to teach him subjects such as complex mathematics, calculus, and other science subjects. Sadly for the teacher, She was embarrassed as Tanisu solved all the problems she brought to the table, and proved to her that he didn't need her help. After defeating the math teacher one day, Tanisu hears his siblings playing outside and asks his father why he didn't let them study. His dad tells him about his siblings' powers and lets him know that he expects little to no brains from them, since they already have their powers going fine for them. Shortly afterward, Tanisu's mother walks up to him and asks him what he'd like to have for dinner. Tanisu tells her to make some milk pudding for him, and she gets up to get it done. Tanisu also asks his mother to make some of the milk pudding for his siblings, but then his dad tells him not to worry about them, as he won't want to tamper with the data. Fast forwarding to the present, Aisuri is seen arguing with Tanisu, while the others sit with them and watch without saying a word. Tanisu was reprimanding Aisuri for going outside without his permission, but then Aisuri was trying to let him know she's not a kid and can do whatever she wants when she wants. Tanisu politely threatens her by placing one of their weird medications on the table and threatening to force her to use it if she doesn't listen to him. At least he's the one doing all the hard work in the house and has been racking his brains to keep the family together, so he thinks he deserves to be respected. The others think about Tanisu's words and agree with him, and Aisuri has no choice but to succumb to Tanisu's orders. However, she makes him promise to do the house stuff without needing anybody's help, and Tanisu assures her that he's going to get it done. With that, he picks up his overalls, puts them on, and heads outside to get something. He gets to the supermarket and stops outside to stare at some treats. Since he's broke, he was unable to buy them. Meanwhile, a little girl just about his age receives a freebie snack from the cashier after buying some stuff from the store. She spots Tanisu staring at the show glass outside and walks up to him. She introduces herself and offers the snack she was given for free to Tanisu. Tanisu initially declines the offer, but then he takes a spoon and savors it warmly. The little lady hands him the rest of the snack and goes on her merry way. Tanisu starts his long walk back home and daydreams about getting lost while on the way. When he snaps back to reality, he realizes that he has a terrible sense of direction and could easily get lost. He thinks of calling his siblings, but then again, he didn't want them trying to save him and all that. So he walks forward and finds a coyote facing him. Tanisu runs as fast as his legs can carry till he gets lost in the forest. About an hour later, his siblings start getting worried about their lastborn, so they leave the house and rush to the forest to search for him. In the meantime, Tanisu is seen sitting and wandering in the thick forest as he wonders if his siblings would have been searching for him by that time. Just a few dozen meters away, Snow and Ashisu manage to get themselves one-on-one with a coyote pack. Ashisu hardens her leg to be like a tree trunk and lets one of the coyotes bite her there. Sadly for the coyote, all his teeth fall off and he runs away screaming with his buddies. The other siblings, Suishi and Aisuri, show up and take over the search. Suishi uses her mind-reading techniques to locate Tanisu and she finds him at the bottom of a cliff. However, to get him, a feral person like Aisuri would have to get down to the cliff and find the little man so she could bring him back to them. Irisu happily takes on the job and glides through the forest branches and trees to get to the base of the cliff. There, she finds Tanisu looking dejected and calls to him. She nearly breaks character, but then she comports herself and tries to scold him in her way. Tanisu, who's seriously happy to see his sister, bursts into tears and hugs her tightly. Aisuri carries him out of the forest and takes him back to everyone. Everyone gets to go home that night, and Tanisu thanks Aisuri for saving him. Aisuri blushes a bit and asks them what Tanisu had planned for dinner that night. Tanisu tells them to forget about dinner and check the improv materials he bought for them from the market. When they get home, he hangs a weird bag on Aisuri's back and folds her spider legs into it. Now she can walk like a normal human and not get discriminated against. He also finds some improv material for Ashisu as well to hide her plant-like body when she goes out for a stroll. Both sisters thank their thoughtful younger brother for the help he rendered them and move on to continue their day. The following day, Tanisu reconnects with one of his tutors after checking through his old notes and finding her phone number there. After getting off the call, Tanisu tells his siblings that he's to meet with the woman on the mainland the next day. Ashisu asks to confirm the real identity of this tutor woman, but Tanisu tells her not to worry too much about the tutor and that they also need someone who can help them out of their current situation, aka a caretaker. Although there's a little grumbling between the others, they all agree to Tanisu's plan. Now this brings them to the next problem at hand. Who will follow Tanisu to the mainland tomorrow? After searching and filtering out some of the others, Suishi volunteers to follow Tanisu to the place, and this comes as a shock to everyone as Suishi isn't the type to go out, especially to a place with lots of people around. Nonetheless, the next day comes swiftly, and Suishi accompanies Tanisu to get to his meeting. After discussing a few things on the way there, Tanisu finds a guy and calls him to ask for help. The guy ignores him and keeps going on his way. Soon, an elderly woman shows up and tries to prey on Tanisu's kindness by asking him to give her some money to catch a taxi. Tanisu nearly falls for her tricks if not for Suishi, who read the woman's mind and knew her trick from the get-go. Before Tanisu could give the woman a dime, she picks up his hand and takes him to the location. The duo walk a few meters until they get tired of walking. Tanisu switches to plan B and outrightly asks the people if anyone knows the way to Mr. Hakun, which is the supposed place for the meet. Just after he asked the question, Suishi closed her eyes and started reading the minds of everyone present in that part of town, hoping to get some directions on how to get there. Thankfully, her plan works, and she finds out how. Once she's done reading their minds, she picks up Tanisu and takes him to the subway station to board a train to the mountainous region. While on the train, a robber tries to steal Tanisu's purse from his left pocket, but again, Suishi catches up to the man's nefarious act and warns Tanisu to keep his wallet close to him at all times. Tanisu thanks her again as they continue the rest of their journey. A few minutes later, Tanisu and Suishi get to their destination and find the contact waiting for them there. Upon seeing Tanisu, her former student, the lady tutor walks over to say hi with a smile on her face. She asks him to tell her why he contacted her in the first place, and Tanisu tells her he and his siblings are in some trouble. When she asks for an account of what happened to them, Tanisu gets too shy to talk. To brighten up the mood, the lady proposes they talk things over some lunch. Tanisu and Suishi agree to this, and they follow the lady to a cafe nearby to get some French toast and iced coffee. Tanisu enjoys his lunch so heartily and thanks the lady for treating them out. As they eat their food, the lady looks up and finds Suishi staring at her. She asks Tanisu who Suishi is, and Tanisu introduces Suishi as his quiet sister, who sometimes hates to be outside. The lady asks Tanisu if the meeting was about her, but then Tanisu tells her no. The lady asks Tanisu to tell her why he contacted her, and Tanisu begins his sob story. In the end, he asks her to help raise them and keep their affairs in order. At this point, the woman keeps a stern face and tells Tanisu to his face that she can't help him. When she was asked why, the woman reminded Tanisu of the humiliation she had to face while she was tutoring him back when he was younger. Being a child prodigy, Tanisu had little to no problem solving math problems that even she couldn't solve herself. Eventually, the news got out and people started humiliating her for not being able to teach an 8-year-old. This made her lose credibility amongst her peers and sent her down the bottom of the food chain. Just then, she throws a fit and calls Tanisu a human experiment. Even worse, she tells him to go to the government so they can be made into guinea pigs. Suishi, who couldn't take it anymore, takes her brother's hands and preps to walk him out of the cafe. As she leaves, she turns to the tutor and leaks out all her secrets right to her face. Then she issues a final warning to her not to harm any one of them so harm doesn't come to her. When she's done, she takes her brother back to the port and boards the ferry with him. On their way home, Tanisu has an existential crisis and asks his sister what she thinks of him. His sister assures him that she thinks highly of him and would never think of him as a science experiment. When they get back to their shoreline, Sumire shows up and introduces herself again to Tanisu. Tanisu, who is about to tell her his real name, thinks about his meeting with the tutor and lies to her, telling her his name is Kanisu. Sumire writes her number on a piece of paper and hands it over to Tanisu to call her whenever he needs her help. Tanisu gets the number and turns to his sister to confirm if Sumire's intentions are good. When he finds out her intentions are good, he bursts into tears and cries like a baby as they walk back home. A little insight is shown to illustrate what happened the night the government found Tanisu's parents on the island they ran to. Rather than getting scared over being caught, Tanisu's parents patiently came to their kids and gave them some pills to make them human for a short while during their vacation. To them, going to prison for a few years was nothing more than a vacation for them in the meantime. Tanisu's dad makes Tanisu the caretaker of the house while they're gone and informs him about the data he stored in the usual place, as he says. He also tells him the password to access the data and leaves the rest of their research to Tanisu to complete. After that, Tanisu's parents left Tanisu and his siblings in the lab and went out to surrender themselves to the government officials. Moments later, the lab blew up, and Tanisu's siblings managed to get themselves and Tanisu safely out of the lab to the opposite shore. Since they lost their parents and were practically strays, the police found them at the shore and took them into the childcare services. With the pill's effects wearing off little by little, Tanisu knows he must get them some shelter before the government knows they were used as lab rats in the experiments. Thankfully, before the effects could wear off, the police found them a new home and already moved them in. However, once the efforts wore off, the side effects came in. Fast forwarding to the current day, Tanisu's seen writing some stuff in his diary when he suddenly closes his book, picks up the bag of pills and stares at his siblings before carrying the bag of pills again. He suggests throwing away the drugs so they don't get to use them again just as he's about to do so. Snow wakes up and tells him about the sound he was hearing downstairs. He urges Tanisu to go check it out so they're sure nothing happens to either. Just then, the other siblings who heard the sounds woke up and followed Snow and Tanisu downstairs. On getting there, Tanisu finds out the phone is ringing, so he picks it up and answers the phone. On the other end of the phone was the landlord who informed Tanisu that he'd be coming over for a visit the next day. From what he could deduce, the landlord sounded like a pretty normal person on the phone with no bad intentions. Tanisu takes a look at his siblings one more time and fears what might happen if the landlord were to find them like this. So he proposes they all head back to the lab on the other island very early the next morning so they can search for more medicine and research data as well. Almost immediately, Aisuri and Ashisu get excited and even start packing clothes for their trip back home. Sadly, Tanisu tells them it's not necessary as they aren't going home for a reunion. Rather, he takes out the dreaded drug and tells them they're going back to get more of that. On seeing the drug, Aisuri and Ashisu jump back in fear of that dreadful pill. Tanisu, however, promises them that he wants to devote his life to making sure he does more research on the medicine so that he can bypass the harmful side effects and make it safe for them to take next time. Aishiru and Ashisu get very violent and start shouting at Tanisu to stop trying to make them take such a bad drug. When the ruckus is about getting too much, Snow steps in and reminds both girls of the party they watched on TV. Almost immediately, Ashisu and Aisuri frolic around the room as they recall the awesomeness of the party. Snow promises to take them there if they can gain human forms again. Upon hearing this, the girls immediately support Tanisu's plan and even cheer him on. Tanisu looks at poor Tanisu and asks if he would also like to follow them outside. Snow tells him he'd like that, and Tanisu promises to make him happy. The next day, Tanisu takes his siblings to the seaport by their island and handpicks a few of them to follow him to the island where the lab is located so they can search the place for their lab. Suishi chooses to stay back to avoid getting into contact with too many people. Tanisu grants her wish and continues to the island with the rest of them. There they play around a little bit before making an inflatable boat to take them to the other part of the island. Suishi gets back to the house, only to realize that Tanisu had the key on him the entire time. In a few minutes, Tanisu and his people arrive at the lab site. On their way to the building, he tells his siblings to be careful of the countless government officials eroding the building at the moment. This means they have to sneak in and guide each other so they don't get caught. As soon as they get to the building, Aisuri jumps into a dark room via the window and opens the door for her siblings so they can enter it. Tanisu tells them to get to the control room next to the kitchen so that if they can get a monitor or two to work, then they can get a feel of what's happening around the building. Little did they know that the cameras and countless objects placed in the dark room were just motion sensors waiting to capture unsuspecting intruders. Nevertheless, they get to the control room and are amazed to see about 10 to 12 monitors still working. Aisuri gets a little curious and asks Tanisu about the data that was supposed to be there. Tanisu, who just wanted some alone time, tells the girls to head back outside and search for an escape route for them, just in case something out of the ordinary were to happen to them. Meanwhile, Suishi, who is stuck outside, senses something with her spidey senses and goes to investigate it. While that happens, Tanisu and his other siblings leave the kitchen control room and sneak past two researchers in the living room to get to their next destination. After getting past two of them, Tanisu stops to check out the building's blueprint. He finds a loophole in the plan and explains how to exploit it to his siblings, just so they can get to the main lab and collect the rest of the data and drugs as well. When he's done mouthing these to his siblings, they all get a move on, making sure to hide out of everyone's sight. They get to a small room at one point, and Tanisu figures out where the data safe is kept. He tells Aisuri to climb up there with her spider legs and enter the password into the safe so she can retrieve the hard copy of the files and bring it down to him. Aisuri gets the files and almost drops them to cause a ruckus. Thankfully, Tanisu gets the files before they hit the ground and checks to see that the data is complete. Satisfied with his findings, Tanisu tells his siblings to get ready to leave the building so they can make it back home in time before the landlord shows up. Unfortunately for them, there's a lightning storm outside, so now they have to wait for the weather to be clear before they can plan their escape. Snow returns to his human form uncovered and complains to Tanisu that the lightning was keeping him from retaining his dog form for longer. Tanisu, who was pretty freaked out looking at his elder brother's bare body, covers him with clothes and sighs in relief. Just then, Aisuri and Ashisu ask for a bathroom break, but then Tanisu tells them to hold it in till they get back outside. This pisses them off badly as they complain about them being ladies to Tanisu. In the end, poor Tanisu is left with no choice but to allow them to do their thing. Moments later, Tanisu hears two researchers coming their way. He thinks quickly and hides in the women's bathroom with Aisuri and Ashisu. As the researchers got closer, Tanisu could hear them talk about the former researchers of the place and how unrealistic their research was. Just then, the two hear someone flushing the toilet near them and get a little scared. One of them even asks if there were ghosts in the house, but then the other one mans up and walks in to check it out. Tanisu, who could hear them coming, quickly takes Snow and the girls and locks them in one of the bathroom stalls to avoid being seen by the researchers. Thankfully, his plan works as the researchers get bored and leave after finding nothing. Up next, Suishi is seen sitting in front of the house staring at the street as she unintentionally reads the minds of the people walking by. Suddenly, she hears the landlord's thoughts and realizes how eager he is to finally meet the kids everyone is talking about. Seconds later, the landlord shows up on his bike and finds Suishi home alone. He gets a little scared as random thoughts pop up in his head which Suishi can hear. Eventually, Suishi tells him the reason why she was outside the house, and the landlord takes out his spare key to open the door. Once they're in, he makes them some tea and tries to start a conversation with the quiet Suishi. He struggles really badly at making a conversation, and even starts sweating at some point, but in the end, he musters up the courage to introduce himself as Yu Kaito, or Kuma, as his nickname. Suishi could see the anxiousness written on his face and advised him to drink his tea so he could calm down. Kaito takes her advice and takes a sip from his tea. Thankfully, this calms him down well enough for him to stop sweating. To prevent such awkwardness from happening again, Suishi gets up from her chair and walks to the bathroom to wash. There, she keeps begging the heavens to bring her little brother and her siblings back safely so she can avoid being alone with the man. Just then, something encourages her to look out the window, and she does. She finds her siblings walking back home in the rain with an umbrella and throws a stone down at them. This alerts the rest and they start making weird noises which the landlord hears. He gets out to the front door and welcomes the siblings inside for dinner. After they're cleaned and dried up, the landlord, Kaito, orders some pizza and Coke for dinner. Tanisu and his siblings each take bites out of the pizza and enjoy it. Kaito tries creating a conversation out of nothing, but then Tanisu gets bratty and throws a fuss over Kaito's negligence over their welfare. Snow tells Tanisu to pipe it down as he is being rude. However, Tanisu tells him the landlord is a nice person who won't allow anything bad to happen to any of them. This sudden burst of emotions surprises Snow, and he wonders if this was because of what they passed through at the lab. Apparently, Tanisu and his siblings had to knock the two researchers out so they could buy themselves enough time to escape, and they did this by forcing Snow to transform into a dog so he could run out of the bathroom and distract the guards well enough for them to knock him out from behind. Before leaving the building, Ashisu and Isuri wrote a horrible message on the wall in their blood to scare the researchers when they woke up. Meanwhile, Tanisu gets upstairs to search for Snow and finds him in his dog form. He suddenly remembers how things used to be back when they were younger and gets a little sad for Snow. Eventually, he gets back downstairs with Snow to look for the girls. Little did he know that both Ashisu and Isuri were already back in their old room upstairs checking out old photos and stuff. Tanisu makes a stop at their former study room and gets a rush of nostalgia as wonderful memories begin flooding his head. He gets a little sadder than normal and leaves before he gets depressed. Lucky for them, this landlord is a good one. Having seen how helpless the kids are, he lets them live with him till they grow old enough to stand on their own. Back at the lab building, the two researchers wake up to find the message on the wall written in blood. This scares the living hell out of them, and they quietly leave that part of the building to the ghosts who wrote such a strange message. The next morning, Tanisu wakes up very late and realizes he's slept in. He immediately jumps out of bed and freshens up before heading downstairs to have some breakfast. On getting there, he finds everyone sitting there at the breakfast table eating to their heart's content. Isuri takes a bite out of her bread and savors the taste. The otters also appreciate how new and tasty the new meals are compared to their old ones. This makes the landlord wonder what kind of meals the kids have been eating in the past. He checks in on Tanisu to make sure he has a good night's rest. Tanisu thanks him for getting them a bed seeing, as he's been sleeping on the floor for quite a while now. Moving on, he starts wondering what he's going to do when the drug's effects expire 24 hours after it's been taken. Apparently, he made his siblings take the drug the previous night and it's been more than 12 hours already. So, from his calculations, he has just 12 hours left to think of a way out or suffer the consequences. He considered administering another dose of the drug to his siblings, but then again, he didn't want the side effects to be stronger from repeated doses. Just as he's about to say something, Kaito speaks up and suggests they all go mountain climbing later that day to have some fun. Tanisu sees this as a very good idea given that there are forests and trees everywhere in the mountains. Kaito asked for the opinions of others, hoping to hear some good news, but then he was shocked when he heard both Ashisu and Isuri place the decision in Tanisu, their youngest sibling's hands. Thankfully, Tanisu accepts the invitation and encourages them to get dressed so they can get to the mountains in no time. Kaito, on the other hand, could only sit and stare at the weird kids. After dressing up, Kaito and the kids head out to the mountains. On their way there, Tanisu keeps his eyes on all of them to make sure they're not spacing out or acting weird in front of the landlord. At one point in their journey, Snow's body gets twitchy, but Tanisu ignores him to keep talking with the rest. Shortly afterward, their discussion is interrupted by a quarrel happening a few meters away from them. Tanisu looks up to investigate the ruckus and finds his friend Sumire arguing with two little boys who were trying to kill a spider in its habitat. Almost immediately, he rushes over to help Sumire fight against the boys. To his dismay, the boys don't budge. Kaito shows up seconds later and tries to scare the boys into thinking killing a spider is bad. Unfortunately for him, the boys were not toddlers, so they weren't scared of his cheap tricks. With their hearts set on destroying the spider, one of the boys holds a short stick and swings it at the spider that is on its web. In the twinkle of an eye, Snow shows up and stops the boy from hitting the spider. Aisuri also shows up and checks on the spider, only to find out that it's been killed already. She picks it up to eat it, but then Tanisu stops her from doing so. Aisuri accidentally drops the spider as three girls approach her to say hi and commend her blonde and curly hair. Tanisu gets a little sheepish and tries shooing the girls away, but then Ashisu, her twin, speaks up and tells Aisuri to cheer up and be proud of her body and gifts. Aisuri, upon hearing such compliments, smiles and gives the kids a little friendly advice. Just then, the tour guide for the kids calls them back to join the tour, so the three little girls say their goodbyes and scurry back to their teachers. After they're gone, Kaito and his people continue their journey till they reach the top of one of the mountains there. They find Sumire and her classmates with their tour guide, and Tanisu waves to her. Snow also waves to the little girl, but she gets a little too embarrassed to wave back to him. Moving on, Kaito tells them to follow him to the windmill next so they can watch electricity being created on the spot. However, Tanisu notices the drug wearing off faster in Snow's body. Scared that he may turn into a dog any second, Tanisu asks Kaito to let Snow get to the bathroom so he doesn't poop all over himself. With that, Snow's allowed to get his bathroom break, so he rushes to the bathroom to do his stuff. Shortly afterward, Tanisu and Sumire get close to the top floor of the windmill and get to spectate the vast forest from one of the building's windows. They find a familiar white dog running through the forest and see a couple writing their names on a tree to immortalize their love. Tanisu and Sumire have their moment for a split second but quickly snap back to their senses. Sumire asks about the white-haired dude who saved the spider from getting hit by the bullies earlier, and Tanisu introduces her to Snow, his big brother. Sumire daydreams about Snow for a while and ends up ignoring poor Tanisu. In the meantime, Ashisu and Aisuri are seen chilling out one level higher than their brothers when suddenly her body starts to change. Knowing what was coming, Aisuri rushed downstairs and got to the forest to get as far away from humans as possible. Suishi comes to Tanisu's level and informs him of Aisuri's ailment. Tanisu got down the building as fast as he could and pursued Aisuri into the forest. Meanwhile, Ashisu followed her twin sister, Aisuri, into the forest to try and stop her from becoming whatever she was about to become. However, Aisuri was too damn scared to let anybody get close to her and slaps Ashisu out of her way to protect her. When her body can't take it anymore, she trips and falls and begins transforming her form into a full spider. In a minute or so, Aisuri becomes a spider and continues running further into the jungle. On her way, she runs into the bullies from earlier and threatens to eat them. Ashisu, on the other hand, gets up and recalls the wonderful moments she had with her twin sister when they were much younger and a little the same in every aspect. Eventually, she mustered up enough courage to get back up and confront her sister so she could buy the boys enough time to run away. Her plan works out well, but then she's left alone with a 50-pound spider hungry for human flesh. What will Ashisu do now? Will she be able to fight her sister like her enemy, or will she beat the odds and figure a way out of this? Well, before the question gets answered, let's go back a few years to find out what happened to the inseparable twins, Ashisu and Aisuri. Back when they were younger, Aisuri's hair was still dark, like her sister's. They were practically inseparable, as said earlier. One day they call on their brother Snow and have him play hide and seek with them. Snow, who's always getting the short end of the stick, stands there in regret as he gets ready to find the girls. Back at the present, Snow is seen smelling the ground for traces of Aisuri and Ashushi's scents. Tanisu also followed suit to make sure he was there when Snow eventually found them. In the meantime, Ashisu wakes up with half her body covered with veins and leaves. She looks across the river in front of her and finds her sister, Aisuri, who's still in her spider form, staring hard at her. While Aisuri wonders what to do with the weird girl in front of her, another flashback flashback is shown to continue the hide-and-seek game during that day. Moments after being made the seeker, Snow morphed into his doggo form and traced the girl's scents to the forest. He finds Ashisu first, and then moves on to search for her twin sister. Aisuri covered her spider legs with some leaves to trick Snow into thinking she was Ashusi. However, Snow quickly saw through the disguise and exposed her to be Aisuri. This shocks both girls, and Aisuri asks Snow how he knew she was the one. Snow coldly replies and tells her that he could smell her from a mile away, as they were quite different from each other. This pisses Aisuri so much that she storms back home complaining about Snow's cold comments. She barges into a room with her sister and causes one of their parents' experimental liquids to fall on her hair. The liquid changes Aisuri's hair color and type into that of a blonde curly hair. This freaks the girls out so much that they rush over to their parents to report the incident to them. Upon hearing all they had to say, their mother reassured them that the hair type liquid was harmless to Aisuri. As for the effects, it's permanent, so Aisuri better get used to her new hair type. That, or she can have her head shaved off with her sister. Their father also reckons with the idea, and even prepares the clipper to shave his daughter's hair off. Scared of losing both their beautiful hair, Aisuri takes her sister and weaves a nest of webs up in the ceiling of one of the rooms in the mansion. Her parents try to get them down from there so they can talk things out, but Aisuri isn't ready to do that because she fears they are only taunting her. In the end, their parents walk away and the twin sisters are left to be there for each other. Back at the present, Ashisu gets closer to her sister's hideous form, dips one end of her roots in the river water, and transforms herself into a tree that wraps itself around her sister. This is to protect the forest around them till the drug's side effects wear off. Some minutes later, the two boys from earlier make their way to civilization and quickly report the spider incident to the grown-ups there. Kaito and Suishi heard them talk and asked them for further information. Kaito, who expected Suishi to come with him, was shocked to find out she wasn't going. Nonetheless, he asked the boys to take him to the location so he can do something about it. Meanwhile, Snow and Tanisu managed to trace their sisters to their exact location. Tanisu is fascinated to find Aisuri and Ashisu's complete form, which is now a full-grown tree, and couldn't help but collect samples for his research. He walks around the magnanimous tree and picks out spider hairs and twigs using his tweezers. In a few seconds, the tree loses its balance and crumbles to the ground. Tanisu and Snow, who are now back in their human form, look at the girls and get back to their original human forms, hale and hearty. He quickly puts clothes on them and watches them hug each other happily over surviving such an ordeal. As the two girls hug and commend each other, Snow tells Tanisu to appreciate the gift he was given, as there's no telling what would have happened if he wasn't such a genius. With that, Tanisu learns to appreciate his talent the most. Shortly afterward, Kaito and the two dudes catch up to them to tell them about the big bad spider. On their way home, Tanisu considers telling Kaito about their powers, hoping he would accept them for who they truly are. Anyway, he dies the idea and makes sure to return home in one piece. After spending hours in the nest, little Aisuri had made close to the ceiling in the flashback. Little Snow came by and invited the girls to eat some snacks with him. This makes Aisuri annoyed so much that she decides to punish him. She gets down from her web, captures Snow, and ties him to a chair in a dark room with a mere bulb lighting the middle. When he comes to, Snow finds himself blindfolded and asks the girls for an explanation. Aisuri hides herself and her sister in the darkest part of the room and tells Snow to identify the person talking just from hearing their voice. Snow easily identifies Aisuri and lets her know that they're not that different from each other. He then asks Aisuri why she wants herself and her sister to be so similar. Aisuri sheds a little tear and slaps Snow for his snide comment. Eventually, Aisuri learns to accept the fact that she and her sister may be a little different after all, and that's totally fine. A few days after the ordeal, things get back to normal. One afternoon, Aisuri finds some of the drugs they used back then to make them human in large quantities. And even worse, Tanisu was hiding them. She takes out a bunch of them and threatens to throw them all away if Tanisu keeps them. Tanisu, after finding out Aisuri went through his stuff, confronts her for doing so and promises not to make them take the drugs ever again. He also lets them in on the secret research he's doing to modify the drug to make them human and completely normal forever, and reassures them that the experiment will be a success. Satisfied with Tanisu's answers, Aisuri lets go of the drugs and lets Tanisu do his thing. Moving on, Tanisu stops to recall the countenance of the landlord, and even considers letting the landlord in on their little secret. But then again, it'll be too soon to rush things and tell the landlord. As any other genius would, Tanisu decides to chill out and study the landlord more to see what comes of him. The following morning, Kaito wakes up early and cooks some breakfast for the kids. Once they're up, the kids are glad to find some of the most delicious breakfast foods on the table already waiting for them. While serving them their food, Kaito tells them about the new furniture he already bought for their rooms on the net. and tells them to anticipate how beautiful their rooms will look when they arrive. When asked why he couldn't just go out and get them physically, Kaito explains the complexities surrounding buying large items such as furniture physically. Since they live on an island, getting good furniture might be a bit of a drag for them, hence the need for an online store, which, so far, has made things much easier to get. After hearing all he had to say, Snow gets confused and asks Tanisu what the internet is. Poor Snow. Anyways, Kaito notices this and asks the guys why they've been living under a rock for their entire life. Tanisu cuts him short to prevent anything from spilling out and gloats about his genius. There's a slight silence and tension in the air, but eventually, Kaito breaks the silence and invites them to follow him to the furniture seller's house to get the furniture he bought from them. Naturally, the kids agree to follow the kind man, and they eat as fast as they can. After eating and freshening up, they all head into town on the island to get to the seller's house. On the way there, Snow and the others, except Tanisu, got fascinated by the awesome things for sale in the market. Tanisu tries to stop them from getting too ahead of themselves, but Kaito tells him to cool off and let the kids be. Next, Kaito takes the kids to the public bulletin board to show them the pictures of the second-hand furniture he bought from the seller. Upon seeing how marvelous the furniture is, Tanisu and his siblings are more than happy to finally get something good. Later on, they all make a stop at an ice cream store, and Kaito gets them some ice cream. Initially, Tanisu rejects his ice cream, but eventually he gets some of them and continues his journey with the kids till they finally get to the secondhand store. There, they find the store attendant to be Sumir's tour guide from their mountain excursion a few weeks back and stop to say hi. Sumir's tour guide asks Kaito what he is doing with kids he doesn't know. Kaito explains things to her and gets reprimanded for being too kind. While that happens, Snow wanders off into the store and finds himself in front of a lot of mirrors. He stares at them and starts getting the awful feeling he gets whenever he's about to turn. Before he does, Kaito walks up to the attendant and asks her where he could find the secondhand furniture. The attendant gets a little curious and asks the kids why they are wearing familiar clothes. The kids answered her by telling her they got them from the recycling bin. This rubs her off the wrong way and she scolds Kaito for it. Furthermore, she directs Kaito to the seller's building and he heads there immediately with the kids. On getting there, Kaito gets the shock of his life when he finds out that the furniture has already been sold out. He asks the seller why she would do such a thing, and the seller tells him her business was a first-come, first-served business, so she had no obligation to keep any furniture for him. Hearing this, Kaito gets back home with the kids. On the way, Kaito gets distraught and apologizes to the kids for messing things up. Initially, the kids couldn't understand him, but eventually, they all came up with an idea to cheer Kaito up. To do this, they all take Kaito to the dump site and encourage him to pick up furniture parts so they can assemble them when they get back home. Kaito gets confused at this strange behavior as he knows everyone likes new things. Still, he liked the idea of the kids not wanting anything to go to waste. As a result, he helps them get the furniture parts and also assemble them when they all get home. While arranging the new furniture, Snow sneezes a little, making Tanisu suspect he has a fever. Nevertheless, Tanisu focuses on the task at hand so it can be done before it gets dark. Once they're done, Tanisu recalls the moments he had with his siblings the first day they were brought to the house. They had just argued their arses out and needed to settle down. To do that, they had to work together back then to assemble whatever little furniture they had and work with it. Now that their house has been upgraded, they're happier than ever to have an adult figure guiding them. Remember Snow's little sneeze? Well, turns out things only got worse for him as he caught a bad fever and became bedridden. Kaito calls the doctor to come check up on him, and after a few days, the doctor runs out of medicine to administer Snow. He discusses things with Kaito and tells him he's a little too busy to get to the mainland to get some new drugs for Snow. Kaito opts in to follow him and the doctor succumbs. Later that night, Aisuri and her twin get a little worried about Kaito and their little brother. Tanisu gets down from Snow's room and tells them just how bad the situation is. To make matters worse, Tanisu tells them the new drugs won't be there on the island till the weekend. With this, he knows he has to do something about it before it's too late. There has to be someone who can help them with the drugs on the island. They just have to find the person. Tanisu begins packing his bags to begin his search, but then Aisuri reminds him of how bad his sense of direction is. Tanisu gets sad, as he has nobody to accompany him, so he doesn't get lost on the road. Lucky for him, Aisuri and Ashisu both opt to follow him, and Tanisu happily lets them tag along. Up next, the trio get prepared and leave the house in Suishi's hands before heading out to find their medicine. Soon after they're gone, Kaito prepares to go out as well. Before letting him leave, Suishi asks to use his computer. At first, Kaito is a little hesitant to release the laptop to him, but then Suishi reads his mind and promises not to touch his corn folder. Embarrassed, Kaito tries to explain to her that he only uses that folder for his study materials. Suishi, who already knew what was up, thanked him for the help, and headed straight to his room to surf the net. Upon getting on a social media platform, she asks the community to give her some information about a drug that can cure endemia. After getting a bunch of insults from the keyboard warriors, she gives up her search and returns to her table. Just then, she reminisced about her time with Snow, the only sibling who understood. Since nobody liked playing with Suishi because of her power, Suishi was always left alone and made to do her things alone. Snow, however, felt sorry for her and transformed himself into his doggy form to help her out. At least Suishi will have a hard time reading a dog's mind since she can hardly interpret their language. Over time, Snow would let Suishi pet him in his dog form so she wouldn't feel too lonely. The thought alone of everything Snow did for her jolts her senses back to reality, and she gets back to the computer to keep looking. After searching for a few more minutes, someone finally speaks up and tells her about a local medicine from the island. Suishi immediately gets interested and asks him where she can get such medicine from. Little did she know that the idiot was a predator in disguise. He asked her on chat to confirm if she was a male or female. Initially, Suishi considered lying about her gender, but then she damned the consequences and told the person that she is a female. Upon finding out that she is a female, the predator reveals his true identity and asks to meet up with her before he can give her the medicine for the sickness. Suishi used a little bit of her powers to hear the dangerous things the idiot was talking about in his mind. Suishi ignored the man and found another contact ready to give her the medicine if she could come to get it herself. Suishi got desperate, turned off the computer, and decided to go outside to get the medicine herself. She makes a stopover at a cafe nearby to get some instant coffee and wait for her contact. Shortly afterward, Sumira's tour guide came by and sat near her. Suishi gets a little curious and asks her how she knew she was the one who called her. The lady not only refused to answer her, but also put on a smug look on her face, almost as if she wanted to taunt Suishi. Suishi cuts the crap and outrightly asks her for the location of the medicine. Before telling her where the medicine is, the lady challenges her to guess what she's thinking first, before she tells her where the medicine is. Suishi tried to read her mind at that moment and figured out how hard it was to do so. This made her a little scared, so she got up, ready to leave the cafe. Sumire's tour guide stopped her from leaving and handed the medicine over to her. Suishi gets back in her seat and gets into a little small talk with the lady. The lady tells Suishi about her real identity and commends her for sacrificing her peace just for her brother. Snow should be fine in a few days if he takes the drug and keeps to the dosage. Before leaving, Suishi lets Sumir's tour guide know that she's helping him because they all need each other to survive. Hearing this, Sumir's tour guide smiles at Suishi and wishes her nothing but the best. Later that night, Snow wakes up from his bed with his body twitching like a zombie's. Unable to speak or call for help, Snow stays put and keeps staring at the ceiling till he gets tired. A few hours later, Tanasu and the other siblings return home with the medicine for Snow. They go upstairs to check up on their eldest brother only to find the room empty. Puzzled, Suishi scans the area with her powers, hoping to get a signal from Snow, but unfortunately, there was nothing. Tanisu gets very scared and runs out of the house to search for Snow. In the meantime, Snow, who'd already turned into some kind of zombie dog, stalks a drunkard aggressively as he walks home in the middle of the night. He waits and makes sure the drunkard gets to his most vulnerable state before striking. Luckily for the drunkard, part of his brain was still working. He was able to see the zombie dog coming at him and ran like a lunatic, shouting for someone to save him from being eaten. Back in the city, Tanasu and his siblings show people pictures of Snow and ask them if they've seen him pass by earlier that day. Sadly, nobody's seen the white-haired boy pass through the town. Devastated, Tanisu considers searching for Snow in the forest, as that's the most likely place he'd have gone to next. Concurrently, the drunk man runs into Sumira while escaping Snow, the zombie dog. Sumira gets a little worried at this and asks him if there's anything she can do to help. However, the man pushed her away and continued running in the opposite direction. Just then, the zombie dog catches up to her and jumps on her. Tanisu, on the other hand, keeps on running as fast as his legs can carry him through the forest so he can get to Snow before he hurts somebody. Along the way, he comes across a black cat that threatens to harm him. Thankfully, the cat wasn't ready to do just that as the rain was making it hard for it. Tanisu ignored the cat and continued running towards Snow. A few meters ahead, Snow is seen struggling with the dog in him as he struggles to revert to his human form. Sumire notices some internal turmoil in Snow's body and offers to help him. However, Snow wasn't going to put the life of a little girl in danger, as he could feel the zombie dog trying to take over his body again. He runs back to the forest to hide from civilization, but Sumire follows him through. She finds him passed out on the ground in the middle of nowhere and tries to get closer to him so she can help him. Sadly for her, she tripped on a ravine and fell to the pit below. Snow, who could hear her screams, gets back up and takes a leap of faith towards Sumire to help save her from falling. Thankfully, his plan worked and Sumire is unharmed. However, Snow was still struggling to keep his head calm. He leaves to get Sumire an umbrella to keep her dry from the rain, and then rushes back into the bushes to calm himself down. Moments later, Snow returns to Sumire as a normal human being. To help him recuperate, despite not knowing his true identity, Sumire allows Snow to rest his head on her lap while they sit under a brightly lit outdoor bench. What they didn't know was that Tanisu had already arrived at the scene minutes ago and could already see his big brother on Sumire's lap. He stays and watches carefully as Sumire leans towards Snow's lips to kiss him while he is fast asleep. Unable to take it anymore, Tanisu ran in the opposite direction, crying softly, as he had just gotten his first heartbreak. Snow hears someone running and wakes up immediately to check out who it is. Unfortunately, he couldn't see anybody. Tanisu gets back home and sits on the floor trying to deceive himself into believing that Sumire wasn't in love with his older brother. However, the other side of him, the bad and negative alter ego, appears in his subconscious and tells him to quit trying to make his siblings fit in. He calls Tanisu his mirror self, a failure who couldn't even get the girl of his dreams. Besides, who would want to date or marry a monster? Sumire? He didn't think so. Tanisu just sits there and keeps wishing the guy who looks like him was telling him lies. He was right about one thing, and that's the fact that Sumire is in love with Snow. Tanisu still refuses to accept that fact as he struggles to keep his head intact. The voice in his head continues taunting him and making him choose between living his best life and sacrificing everything for his monster family. Tanisu rolls on the floor and begs the voice in his head to let him be. When he's finally free from the terrible voice, Tanisu walks downstairs, only to find out that he spent the entire night writhing in pain and fear of losing everything he's ever worked for. Tanisu just lays there on the ground, tired and confused as the entire room seems to go white in his eyes. After looking around the white room for a little while, Tanisu finds himself and manages to get himself a seat on the couch. Just then, he sees Snow trying to take something from the TV shelf and ignores his presence. He then looks around the house to find apparitions of his siblings being happy during a cook-off. The apparitions continue showing up, and Tanisu recalls the first day they arrived in the house they now live in. The day was just like any other, but then Isuri was being a baby about things, as she was getting a little picky about where and where not to sleep. After much persuasion from her siblings, she finally agrees to sleep in the same room as them. Even so, she still complains about the scantiness of the room and wishes there were more furniture around. One day, while on their way to the city, Isuri found a bug on the walls and tried to catch it. Ashisu stopped her from doing that and freaked everybody out. Isuri listens to her twin sister and continues touring the city with Tanisu. To continue the tour, Tanisu takes his siblings to the park around town so they can play there. Snow sees the dogs there playing around the park with balls in their mouth and immediately gets the urge to join them and play. Thankfully, Tanisu was able to stop him before that happened. Soon after, Tanisu took his siblings to the bookstore and bought some popsicles for them to lick on before they got cold. Suishi takes a bite out of her popsicle and likes the taste. After that, Tanisu takes them to another part of town so they can continue exploring until it gets dark. Back at the present, Sumire finds Tanisu sitting all alone and dejected. She feels sorry for him and walks up to him to ask him about his brother. Disappointed, Tanisu keeps quiet and listens to Sumire pressure him to tell her how his brother is doing. When he's had enough, Tanisu tells her he doesn't know about him at all. Sumire asks him if they were fighting, but Tanisu tells her everything, including the fact that he lied about his name to her and he was Tanisu and not Kanisu. Tanisu also tells her about his fight with the other siblings and wishes things weren't so bad between them. Sumire, after hearing all Tanisu had to say, forgives him for lying to her and advises him to go talk to his siblings and settle their quarrel so things can return to normal. Tanisu listens to her advice and musters up the courage to get back home and speak to his siblings. On getting home, he opens the door and hears his siblings' voices inside the house. Tanisu runs into the house only to be disappointed by the emptiness and darkness in the room. Tanisu rushes inside with tears on his face as he starts to rethink his life decisions. He opens a drawer and finds something that makes him remember one of his arguments with Isuri back when they infiltrated the lab to get the drugs and the research material. That night, Tanisu tried to convince Isuri not to stay in the lab as things may get quite dangerous there, but when Isuri's hard-headedness prevented her from thinking things through, he gave her a key to the lab and some important rooms there just in case she thought of returning there. Upon remembering this, Tanisu opens the compartment where Isuri kept the key he gave her earlier and finds nothing there. This can only mean one thing, and that's that both Isuri and the rest are on their way to the island. Without thinking twice, Tanasu runs to the store nearby and begs the storekeeper to lend him a boat he can use to travel to the other island. Unfortunately for him, the storekeeper was just a primary school teacher and didn't have enough power to find Tanisu a boat. Tanisu, who was no klutz, connects the dots and pinpoints several reasons why that same high school teacher would have access to a boat he could use. The teacher commends his analytical reasoning, but then breaks it to him that can't let a child like him get on the ocean, even if his reason is valid. Instead, she contemplates calling the police. Knowing full well that the police won't help the situation, Tanisu stops her from making the call and ponders on his next move. The teacher tries to get him to explain things to her, but then again, Tanisu wasn't ready to divulge all his secrets yet. However, he lets her know that if he doesn't get to them in time, then he may lose his chance to reconcile with them forever. Hearing this, the teacher gets herself and Tanisu some raincoats to protect their bodies from getting too wet from the rain. Then she rides to the beach with Tanisu to get a boat and sail across the ocean to get to the other island. On their way there, the teacher, who later called herself Wei and Tanisu, found Kaito and told him everything. Despite being a coward and crybaby, Kaito mustered up some courage and tagged along with Wei and Tanisu to save Aisuri, Ashisu, Snow, and Suishi. Wei skillfully drifts through the angry waves to keep the boat floating and out of danger. When things die down a little bit, Kaito gets his alone time with Tanisu and listens to whatever he has to say. Tanisu starts by asking Kaito why he's helping him, seeing as Tanisu is someone who can't do things on his own. Kaito tells him not to worry about him and that he thinks of him and his siblings as his own family, even though they're not related by blood. On hearing this, Tanisu realizes he can trust Kaito. He stays silent for the rest of the journey till they finally arrive on the island where the lab is situated. Tanisu spots the boat his siblings used to get to the island and rushes to check it out. Kaito, on the other hand, holds him and encourages him to go find his family. Tanisu immediately runs deeper into the forest to search for his siblings. After he's gone, Wei asks Kaito why he isn't following Tanisu, and he tells her it's because he trusts Tanisu to do the right thing. In the meantime, Tanisu uses all his analytical skills to trace his sisters and brother to a cliff. Unable to jump over the cliff physically, Tanisu takes a vine and ties one of the ends to his feet. He then climbs down the cliff but then loses his footing halfway down and falls to the ground. Tanisu beats the odds and gets himself back up before he continues running towards the laboratory. When he gets tired of running, he screams out Snow's name and catches up to them in no time. When they're face to face, Tanisu asks his siblings why they left him all alone in the city. Aisuri and Ashisu explain the dangers he's exposed to by keeping them around. Aside from the discrimination from those who don't know any better, there's the possibility of them turning into full monsters and attacking their dear little brother. Tanisu, however, didn't care about all those shenanigans at all. All he wanted was for his family to be one again and to make sure they pulled through their adversities together. He gets emotional mid-speech and asks Snow what he thinks about everything he's been doing for them all along. Snow transforms into his man-wolf form to prove his point to Tanisu. Monsters are bad for humans and there's no telling what can happen if their identities leak out. Still, Tanisu refuses to back down at all. Rather, he tells them to believe in the little chance they have at survival. He even goes as far as confronting his elder brother and asking him why he keeps asking selfishly towards him and neglecting him every time they're to do anything special. Snow stands aloof and looks away when Tanisu holds his shirt to keep it with him. When it comes down to it, he leaves Tanisu with Aisuri and Ashisu. Before letting him go completely, Tanisu tearfully asks Snow to tell him how he truly wants to live. Snow, who was already tearful at this point, stares at the slightly rainy night and screams out his true wish, which is to live with Tanisu and the rest of his family without any problems or issues. With that, the Frankenstein family returns to their normal selves. A few nights later, everyone gathers around the round table to eat a large dinner prepared by yours truly, Kaito. They dig in and make sure to savor the entire food in a few minutes. Even Snow struggles to keep himself human, judging by how delicious the food is. After they're done eating, Tanisu calls their attention and asks them for their advice on his next decision. He asks his siblings about their thoughts on telling Kaito about their family. Before they can give him a proper answer, Kaito shows up and asks them what they are hiding from him. Almost immediately, the siblings keep quiet as they get confused over what to do. When Kaito starts talking too much, Tanisu cuts in and tells him they want to talk about their family. Upon hearing this, Kaito's thought process spirals down into streams of random thoughts about a certain person he called Yu. Suishi, who was reading his mind all through, gets tired and pissed at him for mentioning that person, Yu, all the damn time. Eventually, she shushes him and tells him not to think about Yu ever again.